Listeners, welcome back to another episode of the Lead Well podcast. This is Brandon Holland, your host, BW Holland 32 on social media and various platforms. And I am really excited about today's episode. I'm just going to go ahead and let you know if you are in a leadership position, if you're thinking about being in a leadership position, today is the episode for you. But before we get into that, first I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, HyperX. If you are looking for headphones, microphones, audio equipment, computer equipment, anything to get your voice onto the web for podcasting, for gaming, hit up HyperX, and there's going to be a discount code in the show notes. Also, Shackelford Leadership Institute. So if you're looking to level up your leadership like I did, hit up Bob Shackelford at shackelfordleadership.com. And if you're looking for coaching, if you're looking for growth, if you're looking for an event speaker, um, he's the person to go to. So make sure that you're following and staying in touch there as well. And so today we've got my good friend Nick Dyson on the show. Nick is a fellow speaker. He's a podcaster. He is a coach. He does trainings. He is someone who will help you get better at leadership. And so we would like to welcome Nick to the show. Nick, welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you for having me on. And just for your listeners to know a little bit more, I do desk workshops, coaching, like you said. I host the Dyson Leadership podcast, YouTube, you name it. I've had the privilege of kind of being around and impacting a lot of people. And that's ultimately why we do what we do, isn't it? Is we want to add value to people, impact them, help them just become better. So I'm excited to be on with you today, excited to talk about some leadership related stuff. And um, hopefully it'll be good added value to your listeners today.
Oh, I don't doubt it, man. From following your content and just kind of being engaged myself, from the things that I've learned, I'm sure, listeners are going to get a lot out of this. But before we get into all of that, give us a little bit about your background, maybe share a little bit more information about you and kind of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I got started in this lane of my life and career coming out of the pandemic and was looking at, okay, what are some things that I can do as a side hustle was kind of the initial thought. And that's where it kind of birthed the idea of what if I got involved on social media content and YouTube and podcast and went through several iterations, different ideas. But ultimately, I joined the Maxwell Leadership Certified Team, their program. I was familiar with John Maxwell, went through their training to get John Maxwell's content with the anticipation of that being a big avenue for my business to get started and grow. So, that was where it kind of started. And from there, it's really just branched and grown from there. So I come from a human resources background. That's HRIS. I do analytics, reporting, even training and development, just kind of a catch-all in the HR field. But then I got involved as well in the last few years in becoming an adjunct instructor for a couple colleges.
Wow.
And so currently I am an adjunct instructor or adjunct professor of management and leadership for Appalachian State University here in North Carolina. So I teach for them and teach leadership, management related courses to undergrad students. Then I have my business, which I started a few years back, Dyson Leadership, which has branched from just doing some social media content and some lunch and learns and very basic stuff to now working on workshops and disc assessments, disc workshops, coaching for different groups, different clients, working with businesses, churches alike, and so many different people. It's been such a privilege these last few years that just getting to impact students, getting to impact businesses, getting to impact churches. It's truly a rewarding field that I've kind of landed in here.
Dude, that's so awesome. So you are, I want to be like you when I grow up. I've dabbled in like the coaching, I've dabbled in the speaking, I've dabbled in like the business side of it. But you're going full steam, man, and it's admirable. Um, So, in this business, this leadership realm, one of the topics that you and I have talked about, very briefly, is about like the different generations that are currently in the workforce, and like, what that provides as far as like leadership challenges and opportunities. Um, so, like, for our listeners, along those lines, what are some of the things that you've seen that leaders need to be aware of when dealing with so many different generations, and there's such a large gap between the folks that have been here for a while and the folks that just got here? What's important there?
Absolutely. One of the biggest things I've probably done as many workshops on this topic specifically this year as I have anything else. And it's because so many people they experience this in one way or another. You've got your young employee coming in and you've got your senior manager and they can't communicate. They're not seeing eye to eye. And you've got your Gen Z using some words and lingo you don't understand. You've got your senior leadership doing something else and they're just on opposite pages. And the biggest thing that I've seen in this is realizing that the world has changed so much in especially the last 20 years. And so when you start to look at the way generations have shaped up themselves over the last few generations, you see so many new things. Like if we just, for example, we go 20 years back from right now. We land in the year 2005. Smartphones are not a thing, tablets are not a thing. All of these social media platforms like TikTok, Instagram, all of these things that so many people are on, they don't even exist yet. So all of this is in the last 20 years.
Yeah,
And so when you take that into perspective, you've got people, if they're working and they've been in these positions for 15, 20 plus years, the way they started their career is drastically different than the way people are starting their careers now.
yeah,
And one of the big changes that I see that's a big challenge for leaders too is just not taking the time to understand their team, where they understand the job, they understand the tasks that need to be done, but they don't take the time to understand the motivations of the younger employees. Obviously, some people they're money motivated. You give them a
right,
paycheck and they're going to come work and they're going to be happy and do whatever because as long as they're making good money, they're
yeah,
fine. But especially for millennials and Gen Z, there is another category of people that's down in there where it's not always about the money. It's about, is my work meaningful? Can I have an impact with my job? Is there growth and development and learning opportunities? Because I'm early in my career and I one day want to be a director or a VP. How do I get there? Show me the path. Show me how I need to grow. And they're looking for these opportunities early in their career. And the lack of understanding of motivations behind younger employees is something that causes a lot of frustration. There's research that I found in going through this topic where it is a significant number. I forget the percentage right off. I want to say it's around 60 or 70% of millennials and Gen Z say they're looking for training and development plans. They're looking for ways to grow and develop. And then that research went even further and said that it was about 50% of those that said they were looking for that said they would quit their job if it wasn't clearly defined. And so if you're looking at, let's just take on the low end and say every other employee is looking for some type of growth and development program, 50-50 shot. And then 50-50 of that say, I'm going to quit my job if it's not clearly defined. You're roughly having one out of every four of your young millennial and Gen Z employees, they're just going to leave. They're going to back out if it's not, their motives are not understood and there's not a learning plan. And that's just such a simple thing. But understanding motives is one of the big ones that I see that leaders right now are not always getting.
wow, that's super important. One of the things that kind of comes to mind is like, you know, folks. some folks are on the same mindset as me where I look for loyalty in an
Hmm.
organization, right? And so, it's almost like I haven't given you the opportunity to be loyal if I haven't taken the time to understand these things and then, in turn, be the manager or leader that you need me to be in order to provide the organization that loyalty. So I
Yeah.
totally get that. Wow. So just kind of switching topics just for a second. So the first book that I read all the way through was a John Maxwell book. I think I was I think I was a junior in college before I ever read a book like cover to cover. And this one, like, I just couldn't put down. And even today, like, I still give this book to all of my interns because I want to let them know that, like, hey, like, you don't have to be at the top. So the book was 360 Degree Leader.
Hmm.
I was working with a church. I was a youth pastor, and the pastor, I guess, saw some leadership potential in me and gave me that book. But I wanted to let these young folks know that, like, you don't have to be at the top in order to be a leader within the organization. So when it comes to like younger leaders and development, what are some of the things that that you kind of touch on as far as like your coaching that young leaders like need to be aware of or need to start working on?
Yeah, so one thing I'll quickly just address is you referenced loyalty. One big shift between the generations is the loyalty used to be about loyalty to the company, but in younger generations, more often they're looking for company loyalty to me. And so there's a shift
Wow.
in mindset of loyalty as well. But I heard you mention that word, but that's something else. That's a freebie for your audience there.
Yeah.
But then as far as advice, younger leaders, the 360 Degree Leader, that is a fantastic book. Another one that really impacted me is similar in kind of its premise, and it was written by somebody who was a youth pastor, but it's how to lead when you're not in charge. And
Wow.
it really kind of reshaped that mindset and that framing where for a long time for me, I had the idea of, okay, I need to work hard. I need to rise through the corporate ranks. I need to get the manager title, the manager position. Then I am a leader. But that's not the case. And so I pull a lot on my personal experience. One thing that I learned, and funny enough, it was a lesson from my parents, but it is learn as much as you can and try to make yourself as valuable as you can to a company. And so I always approached it as trying to be a sponge. And what I got to noticing in my corporate career when I would do that, even though I may only have a couple years of experience in a given job, if I am learning and asking questions and taking notes and trying to intentionally soak up all the information I can quickly become an expert versus somebody who is just sitting there going, I'll learn it in time. And so
Yes.
I saw it in instances where if you are intentional and you're asking the right questions and you are engaged in learning and trying to improve your knowledge in an organization or for a business, there are a lot of people who do not take that initiative and you will pass them by, even if you are not given that title of manager or leader. You quickly become a person who people come to for help or they come to for advice and they come to for, you know, Brandon, he's a go-to on this information. The manager knows a lot, but Brandon, he has made himself an expert in this. You need to go talk to him. And I found myself in many instances like that where it was, how do you deal with angry customers? How do you deal
Mm.
with conflict? How do you deal with this type of pricing model or these types of things in the corporate roles that I was in? And people would say, Nick has really done a great job at getting to know that. Nick has really prepared well. And I was becoming a go-to resource just because I would ask questions where most people wouldn't.
Wow.
And so, my advice always to young leaders is ask questions, be curious and inquisitive, ask the right questions to fill in the gaps. Don't assume you have all the answers, and don't assume somebody's just going to come along and tell you everything you need to know. Reach out and get help. And that's part of why I do coaching is, can coach, can work through ideas, but then Seek out who are the experts in your company. If you have a certain area you want to learn, find somebody that's willing to teach in that area and ask questions. The worst thing that they can say is no or reject you shadowing, and then maybe you go and find somebody else. But if you
Yeah.
can learn those things and take that initiative, it sets you up for so much more success because there again, nobody's going to come along and just hand you all of the answers.
Right.
Sometimes you have to go find them for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. That's absolutely true. And that, that response made me think of one of my favorite John Maxwell books, which is Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. And dude, I probably go through that book at least twice a year, just because I want to keep it in my mind and just
Yeah,
stay
it's a
in that
great book.
mindset. What's your favorite? What's your favorite John Maxwell book?
Oh, that's a tough one. The one that I tend to go back to more often than others because there's a couple.
Okay.
Developing the leader within you is one I go back to. The 21 Laws of Leadership. Obviously, that's kind of a go-to. But for me personally, the 15 Laws of Growth is the one that I go to of John Maxwell's. And the reason for that is anytime I realize I am neglecting my own personal growth, then I am neglecting everything else. Business growth, relationship growth, my faith growth, I'm neglecting leadership growth. It truly starts with that personal growth aspect. And I'm firmly a believer if you lead yourself first, then you're prepared to go and lead others. So
Absolutely.
it's for me, it's not a selfish thing. It's truly, I want to grow and be the best version of me so that I can give a better version of me to other people.
That's it. That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. And one thing that Craig Rochelle says, at the end of almost every one of his episodes is, when the leader gets better, the entire team gets better. So growth, it always trickles down. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, kind of going back to more of the generational conversation. So, for our listeners that are in leadership positions, or maybe dealing with some of this, what is I know there's a million different things, but what's one thing that leaders can do to help uh, all these different generations like work together? I say all the time, one of the people that I admire is Steve Jobs, and not for the same reasons that everybody else does, but when they started creating Pixar, he was able to take two completely different groups of people and make them work together for a common goal. So, like, what's one thing that's just that would be able to help the leader lead in this situation?
Absolutely. One of the things that I see the most, and it's probably if I had to pick one thing to really target, is what is the best way for my team to communicate? And here I'll give you a couple examples. So I've had an instance for me personally where I have had leaders or people that I work with where some maybe fall in Gen X and they tend to respond really well to email. I've had some that are more millennials and they respond way better to text messages, and I've had some that are Gen Z that way respond better to instant messaging like Slack or Teams or some
Yeah.
application like that. And so it's the challenge of how best do we communicate as a team?
Hmm.
And that's such a simple thing because we live in a world that's got remote workers, we're at different office locations, we're not always in the same room or the same building. We rely a lot on digital communication. And psychology has studied and said that only about 7% of communication is the written part of it. 93% is tone of voice, nonverbals, body language, everything else. So in digital communication, we lose a ton in communication. So in those instances, I've personally had to adapt how I communicate. If I've got a Gen Z coworker that responds great to instant messaging, that's their preferred way of messaging, and that's the way I need to engage them. If I have a Gen X supervisor that responds way better via email, I need to send them emails and not instant messaging or text messages because they're again something's going to be lost in communication. And just kind of a funny example, one Gen X individual I had, I could send an instant message on Teams and I would be lucky to get a response within an hour or maybe 2 hours.
Yeah,
I could send an email and I would have a response within 10 to 15 minutes.
yeah,
And so, what's more important? What's the higher priority? And that's a challenge for leaders. But if you're able to acknowledge how people respond, how they tend to work, what's the best ways to contact or communicate with them, that's always beneficial. And even for millennials, one thing I kind of joke about, a lot of millennials don't like answering phones.
yeah.
That's the thing I hear all the time is millennials do not like answering the phones or being on phone calls. But if you send them a text message or an instant message, they typically respond really quick and they're very attentive to those things. So, as a leader, ask yourself, if I'm reaching out to these people, how do they typically respond best? Do they respond better by email, phone, text, instant message? What works for my team? And what are ways we can bridge those communication gaps?
Wow, I love that, especially for for the manager or leader out there who is just in love with one form of communication. Like everything Nick just said is for you. Um, we say that we'll do anything for our teams, and we will, except be flexible. And so, it's on us to, get away from our preferences and to lean more toward catering to our team. And so I love everything you just said. That's awesome, dude. We're getting a little close to time. So, Nick, for our listeners, is there anything else that you think we need to know, or anything else you'd like to share?
Yes, very quickly. Gen Z is obviously the big topic. That's what everybody looks at in the multi-generational workforce because they are the ones that are quickly becoming a very dominant force. One quick bit of information that will help you. Gen Z, you're typically going to get one of two categories. Sadly, I've talked to a lot of HR managers where they're not prepared for the workforce, or they come in very entitled, or they have overly inflated expectations, which is sad. I feel like we as a society have done them a disservice in preparing them for the workplace in that way. But the other side of Gen Z that you get, they are driven, they are passionate, they are extremely entrepreneurial. A lot of them want to own their own businesses, and you see them driven for just a mission, a purpose, and wanting to succeed. And they are amazing coworkers and employees. So it's sad in the instance that it's kind of two sides of a coin, and you hear a lot of the negative, but there is so much positive in these younger generations as well that managers and leaders can really pull from.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. That's great. And one thing that we have to keep doing as leaders is learning, and you can learn just as much from them as they can from you. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I totally agree there. Before we go, Nick, how can our listeners find you? How can they keep up with you? If they need to reach out for your services, where can we find you at?
Absolutely. So on Facebook and Instagram. You can find me at Dyson Leadership. My website for my business, my services is DysonLeadership.com. That is Dyson like the vacuum company. I do not get any revenue from that, but that's the
Okay,
easiest way to explain it. So DysonLeadership.com. For TikTok and LinkedIn are other two ways to connect with me. You will want to look for Nick Dyson 13. I go by my personal name on those two. But you can find me across all those major social platforms, my website. Definitely, if any of your listeners want to connect, follow along, see the content I put out. YouTube as well. I put out YouTube videos and my podcast, Dyson Leadership Podcast, that's on there as well. Tons of different ways they can connect and find maybe some content that would be valuable to them.
great, thanks, man. And we'll to the listeners, we'll put all those links in the show notes. So if you're looking to connect with Nick and maybe get some help on some leadership, or get some coaching or a disc assessment, those links will be in the show notes. And so, to you, the listeners, thank you so much for rocking with us for this long. We will have another episode for you again in 2 weeks. And also, Upcoming, I will be sharing a little bit about my stay in ICU and how I got called the N word at church. So you guys stay tuned. Make sure you're following along and make sure you have your alerts set so you know when we drop a new episode. Thanks, and we'll see you soon.